Welcome, everyone, to the Modern Day Overthinker podcast. My name is Collin, and I'm your host. This week's episode is with Laura Ollinger. She's a teen parent, well-being coach, speaker, mother, and the host of the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. She focuses on raising confident, motivated, and emotionally intelligent teens and tweens. And we had a great conversation about all that she does. She's very passionate. And she is not just one of those coaches where you're like, man, she just took a class for like a couple weeks. She's certified. She's done the homework. She knows what she's talking about. And well, as far as I can tell, she didn't fool me. But no, I'm kidding. She was a great guest. I was happy to have her. We had a great conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. This is episode number 96 with Laura Ollinger. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Modern Day Overthinker podcast. My name is Collin, and I'm your host. Today's episode is with Laura Ollinger. I said that wrong, didn't I?
No, you got it. You nailed it.
I always think I'm going to butcher the name every time, but glad we got time to meet, and wanted to let you have an opportunity to introduce yourself to my listeners. As far as the intro I have is your teen parent well-being coach, speaker, mother, and host of the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Did I miss anything there?
No, I mean, you covered it. So yeah, I work one-on-one with families. So meaning typically people hire me to work with their teenager, but it's never one-on-one. I always require that the parents get coached as well. They might not even necessarily know they're getting coached, but they know that there's some conversation that we're having about how to support their teenager. And then I absolutely love working with groups. I do lots of workshops. So sometimes parents, sometimes teenagers, and like you mentioned, the podcast. And then I also am doing speaking in middle schools and high schools now, speaking in a motivational capacity. And so, yeah, I'm kind of surrounded by teenagers, to be honest, because, as you mentioned, I have 4 kids, and they're all teenagers, ages 13 through 17. So yeah, Whoa. Everywhere I go, I'm just teenagers everywhere.
That's a lot of energy.
It is. It is.
A lot of different types of energy too.
Yeah. But I love it. It's what gives me energy. I feel like if I'm not around it, then I'm like, where are my people? Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So how long have you been in the field?
So I've been doing, well, first of all, I've been a mom for 17 years. So I always like to start there. But in a formal capacity, I started my coaching in school in 2020.
Okay.
And so immediately you have to start coaching. That's the unpaid version of it, where you have to get 100 hours in order to become eligible to take the national board certification. So I am a nationally board certified health and wellness coach. And so, yeah, it was back in the COVID times, which was perfect because then I literally was working with people from around the world. One of my very first clients was in China, which was really interesting. It was really fun to coach her, but it was great because it helped me realize that a lot of the things that we're dealing with are really universal. And so I felt like, okay, well, if this is working for her, it can work for the, people much closer to home.
So did you learn any Chinese?
I did not. I know that's the one thing I couldn't do still. But I did learn. It was really cool, actually, because we were working on some of her routines. And so she was trying to just become a healthier person in general in every way, And she would talk to me a lot about what she was cooking at home. So I got to learn a lot more about the food. So that was really interesting.
Awesome. That's my favorite.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to hear about that. But yeah, your main focus is on doing some research on you, it was focusing on raising confident, motivated, and emotionally intelligent teens and tweens. That's always a fun word.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit more about that and your approach to getting to that level and, achieving those results with an age group that's, some consider tougher than others. I'll say that.
Yeah, you could say that. Yes. So, the number one thing I have to start out with is just getting buy-in from the teenager themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when a family calls me, I'm always meeting initially with the parents and I say, okay, well, step 2 of this process is that I meet with your child on a Zoom and we're just going to chat for like 20, 30 minutes, get to know each other, let me kind of learn more about them, to make sure that it's a good fit, right? Like I'm not going to try to coach someone if they're not a good fit, or if I always say, if they don't like me, no problem. I won't get my feelings hurt.
Yeah.
But inevitably, that's a great time for me to build rapport with that teenager and really make them feel heard and understood and kind of not alone in whatever it is that they're experiencing, because so many times they think that they're the only one in the world that feels like that. So I just try to help normalize it and let them know, this is super common. People are just not talking about this. So I get buy-in from them, but then I also really want to ask them that they're going to be kind of active participants in the process. Like I can't coach someone if they're, for some reason, just shut down, not wanting to talk, right? They have to be open to the process. And so I really ask them that question, like, if their parent is forcing them to be on this call with me, it never really happens, but there's always that initial hesitancy of like, who is this stranger that my parents are making me meet and talk to? But luckily, they tend to warm up pretty quickly. But then also with coaching, it's different from therapy, where if you go to a therapist, you go and you kind of vent out all your feelings and you walk away and maybe you feel better and lighter because you kind of got something off your chest. That's not really how coaching works, although a lot of times they do feel great and inspired and motivated when they get off the call with me. But really, it's about the work that they do in between the sessions. So I meet with them generally weekly, but they have to take what we talked about and go and put it into action in their real lives. And that is where the real benefit happens, because it's all about getting those little repetitions in and putting themselves in, a kind of healthy, like risk-taking situation where there's a chance of something going wrong, but that's how they build their confidence. And also just experiencing the emotions, because we all know nobody is just like happy all the time and life doesn't go smoothly all the time, right? Like inevitably they're going to have the ups and downs, and it's just learning how to deal with those ups and downs. And so then when we talk about that in the session, and then they go and they have an up and down week, but they were able to recover and have that resilience, that is a win. And then they come back to me the next week and they tell me, and I say, that's fantastic, right? We get to celebrate that. So that's just, it kind of in a nutshell, how that would start.
That's awesome. So one thing I've had a couple different coaches on before. Well, how would you describe the difference between your approach in coaching and them seeking a therapist? Because I know there's a line there, obviously, and there's probably certain points where you're like, that's out of my realm, or, they should be seeing a therapist. Or how would you describe the biggest difference between a coach and a therapist? I guess that's the easiest way to ask that question.
Yeah, and it's a good question, because a lot of times parents are confused about what would benefit their child best.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it is really gray. Like they could definitely get a benefit from me, and they could also get a benefit from a therapist. And so it's really just like, when it's that kind of close of a call, it's really just personal preference at that point. Kind of, you have to be able to, again, feel comfortable with the person that you're talking to. So at that point, maybe it's just a judgment call on who you think your child would do the best with. But yeah, typically in a broad sense, the therapist is focusing a lot on feelings of just kind of uncomfortable feelings. A lot of times it might relate to something from the past. It could be a severe trauma. Some, psychologists that are also therapists are dealing with either a mental illness that would be kind of a psychiatric level, or so a mental illness or a mental health issue that's severe and kind of clinical, so to speak.
Yeah.
So if it's, I don't treat any type of eating disorder. I don't treat anything, so to speak. I don't actually, that's not like why they're hiring.
You coach.
Yes, I'm a coach. And so the idea is that we're more forward focused and we're more action oriented and we're also more goal oriented. And so it's kind of the idea is they're coming to me and we set out, and teenagers really are fairly allergic to the word goals because it stresses them out, right?
Yeah.
So I do try to refrain from using that word a whole lot, but we just talk about some like measurable progress. So if they're just having feelings of something that is making them feel like they're not good enough, maybe they have some social anxiety, maybe they have a fear of rejection, maybe they're just so stressed out with like school and work and social life and academics and extracurriculars, like trying to manage it all, and they end up having a lot of outbursts at home, like kind of very outward, and there's a lot of conflict, or they're really retreating and they're kind of shutting themselves into their room. As long as it's not to the level of like clinical depression where they're completely shut off from the world, then that's a coachable thing that I can work with, right? I can either coach the parents, where I actually have had a couple clients, well, one in particular that I'm thinking of, where the son was pretty shut off. He really just wanted to play video games. He didn't want to go to school a lot. Or, he was a senior and he was going to graduate, but he had to go to school. And so therefore he wasn't going to graduate if he didn't go to school. Yeah. And so it wasn't really depression, but it was just really like an imbalance and a dysfunction within the family unit. And so I didn't work with him.
Priorities were a little
the mom. Yeah. And I coached her about how to help get some leverage to help the kid, because it's in his best interest to graduate from high school. And so we had to, do that. But yeah, so long story short, it's just all about taking someone from where they are to where they want to go. And a lot of times teenagers don't really necessarily know specifically, but that's where I get the information from the parents. Or the other part is that every, and I mean every teenager I've ever asked, it is always the same answer in some way, shape, or form, which is every teenager wants to feel calmer, like just calm. And they also want to feel confident in themselves, because that's just something that all teenagers are struggling with. I mean, I'm sure not maybe all, but a lot of, they don't feel 100% confident in every area of their life. So even if they're confident with their friends, maybe they're not confident with their grades or their sports or whatever, right? There's all these areas. And then competent, like that's the other thing. And that's not the most common one that they come to me for, but they just want to feel like good about what they're doing in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you brought up video games. This is a random question, but how often do you run into that issue as a barrier? Like someone that's like really, because video games and like just screens in general seem to be a big thing right now. Obviously, all of them have cell phones, and how do you deal with that? And people that are addicted to their phone or addicted to video games, is that something that's fairly common?
I haven't gotten a lot of true addictions. I would say the one I described was like kind of a true addiction in the classic definition form, but more in just like resorting to using their devices to regulate their emotions.
Yeah.
Is extremely common. I mean, we get that.
That's
yeah. So what we're seeing is that we're all, even not just teenagers, but adults as well, using our devices and our technology as coping mechanisms, as a tool for stress management. And the paradox there is it actually almost, generally speaking, actually creates more stress, and people don't realize it. They're not like having that awareness. I mean, think about how many tabs you have open on your browser window at any given moment. Think about all the different screens, and then whether you work at home or you're at home and you're kind of doing your personal life, then we've got the TV and the phone and the Netflix and the computer and right? It's like we're surrounded by them, and where it gets a little bit dangerous, kind of like what you were alluding to is maybe like an addiction level. It's when that becomes the primary resource for almost anything. So a lot of teenagers really want to connect with their friends socially through gaming. Yeah. And if that becomes the primary source versus like hanging out in real life, IRL.
Phones and that dopamine kick we get from the phones is like, I've been learning more and more about it. And also you were talking about human interaction and how important that is instead of, virtual interaction like through gaming or social media. And I catch myself doing that, and I have friends that that game, and they have a lot of friends that, you know, they've never even met in real life, which is fine to have that, but like the human interaction in person, you can't replicate that.
Right. Right. And that's a thing where I think so many, especially the boys who really are doing a lot of the gaming, they're really starved for that. And they just don't always necessarily realize it because they're so disconnected from, you know, there's these parts of our brain that have, you know, we sense things with our bodies, and you know, that part starts to get shut down and we don't even realize, like, they're starved for maybe a hug, they're starved for a high five, they're starved for
Yeah.
eye contact, they're starved for that, and they just don't even realize it because you're right, it's getting overshadowed by that dopamine that's like, oh, well, that feels good, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah, it's easy, quick.
Yeah.
It's right there. So as far as for your coaching is concerned, what made you decide to get into coaching? I know obviously you have kids of your own. That probably played a factor. But what was it, the pandemic, or was it something different that made you want to, you know, get into coaching?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it was like literally 5 different things that kind of all happened within a similar time period. So yeah, first, my oldest child, when she was even back in 4th grade, was starting to have symptoms of like test anxiety, which is really kind of a form of social anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
I
so
can
she was always
relate.
afraid to be the last person to turn in her test because she thought it would make her look dumb if she was the last person. And so she ended up, you know, starting to fail her math class. And I mean, it's just, now that I think about it, and you know, she's a senior, she's about to graduate high school. It just like really, it's funny because we actually talked about that recently. She's like, yeah, I still don't want to be the last one. I still don't want to look dumb.
That's
But
a thing. It's a thing. Yeah.
yeah, that was a real thing. So that was kind of when I first started just kind of learning more about just like mental health and really what it was. But even when they were little, I always remember being worried because social media was created the year my oldest daughter was born. And so I always remember like hearing about it and thinking, oh gosh, when my kids are teenagers, I'm going to be screwed, or what am I going to do? And in my brain, I catastrophize, like, how are we going to deal with that? So I was already kind of like working myself up into a frenzy about it. And then like 4th grade, she didn't have social media, but this was happening. And then shortly after that, I realized I was ready for a new career. And so I actually went and got a master's in health and wellness education, and simultaneously got a functional medicine health coaching certification, which set me up to become nationally board certified. And then on top of that, then I also got a life coaching certification and a whole bunch of other like parenting things. I just kind of went a little bit crazy because I love to learn and I'm always doing something. I'm always gaining new knowledge. But then the real thing, and I was in my master's degree studying the stress of parents. But then it also very quickly to learning more about the stress of teenagers because my nephew took his own life when he was 20 years old.
I'm sorry to hear
And that was the thing. Like, you're kind of saying, like, what was the thing? And that was just one of the things
questions.
I was like, you know what? I feel really incredibly called. And I now feel that I'm at that time wasn't yet prepared, but felt like I was putting myself in the position to become prepared to be able to deal with problems like that, to help prevent and to kind of put myself out there as a resource for teens and parents who are kind of just like, we don't know what to do. And a lot of times, you know, therapy does have a negative stigma, especially for teenagers, because it makes them feel like something's wrong with them. And they don't really necessarily want to do it. There are some that they, you know, kind of brag about it, like, oh, my therapist and my this and that. Right? But that's not really the most common. Most of the time, it's more of the negative. Whereas, like, what I was excited about learning how to become a coach is because that's kind of more empowering. It's kind of cool. Like, anybody like who has like a life coach or just some type of a well-being coach, like, that's something that doesn't, in my view, feel like it has to be negative or embarrassing for a teenager if they were to talk about it to their friends, which they generally don't. They keep it private. But it just felt good to me to know that they wouldn't be upset by the fact that their parents wanted them to work with a coach.
Is that why you chose coaching over maybe just going the therapy route?
Yeah, that really is. That's really a big part of it. And I also, the other part about coaching is we focus a lot on positive psychology.
Hmm.
And so what that is really looking at what's right with the person versus what's wrong with the person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like it's the newer, more modern version of psychology that they've done so much research, and it's really kind of a newer field. It's only existed about 20 years where they started really researching that if we just focus on somebody's strengths instead of their weaknesses, that they can go so much farther by just kind of focusing on those strengths, and then other versions of just like that, those positive psychology interventions, which, there is again some overlap with therapy,
Hmm.
mindset resets and the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of think, feel, do, have. The thoughts that we think create our feelings, feelings create our behaviors, behaviors create our results. So there is that overlap. But again, we're all, every time I start a coaching session, I always, the first question, and they know, my clients know, the very first question I'm going to ask every time is what has gone well this week? So
Mm.
we're starting the tone off
Yeah.
immediately by I'm forcing them to focus on the positive things. I mean, I could get on there and just let them rant for 10 minutes. And I do, by the way, allow that. Like, is there
Yeah.
anything you need to get off your chest? Like, I
Yeah.
do give them that space, but they know that that's not going to be the focus.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess it would be like beneficial for some, well, for not all kids, but to have both. So they're kind of like if they have like a diagnosable, mental illness, like I'm just using me as an example. Like when I turned 13, I was a little after I turned 13, I just developed I don't know if symptoms is the right word, but I developed obsessive compulsive disorder.
Mhm.
It just like hit me out of nowhere, and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't understand how my brain is working right now, and it was just a whole process. And there's a lot of, I mean, you could focus on the positives of that. The positive thinking does help, but I also needed, obviously, like, hey, like there's a lot of things that are really good for OCD that are practiced, like ERP, for example, is something that's the most common practice. That's like the gold standard is exposure response prevention. But I could have, yeah, they did not have coaches. Coaches are a newer thing too. Like that wasn't like I didn't have that. My parents didn't have that option when I was growing up. So it makes me wonder, if I would have been somebody that could have benefited from having not only the therapist or the psychiatrist, but having a coach as well. Because, yeah, I did notice, like, yeah, it can get therapy can get kind of doom and gloomy sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, it does have a negative reputation. I promote it, and I think everyone should. I mean, but also, like, if you don't have a diagnosable mental illness, like something very specific, like
Mhm.
OCD, for example,
Mhm.
I mean, maybe you can benefit from someone, from just having a good coach and somebody like that's going to. I kind of look at coaches not only as coaches but cheerleaders as well.
Yeah.
That seems kind of simultaneous because it's very positive, it's very supportive. It's like you're on the sidelines cheering them on and giving them the tools to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everything you said is really relevant because I have had multiple clients that were working with a therapist and I was working with them simultaneously, or sometimes maybe they were taking a break from their therapist and they were just trying me out for a little while. So there is definitely a place and space and a time and a place for both to work.
Hmm.
And I've worked um, on with a client who was also working with a psychiatrist. So it can be
Yeah.
both and we can each like kind of stay in our lane. And I have had phone calls where we are kind of collaborating and figuring out how we could best support the client. But that being said, yeah, I think the part about your OCD and could you have benefited from a coach? Yeah, I would say, because I have had one specific client that's coming to mind. I wasn't treating her OCD and they knew that, like that
Yeah.
wasn't like what we were doing, but we were just working on setting up some positive behaviors for her. And also, she hadn't really spent a lot of time exploring, like, where did the OCD come from? Like, why did it happen? And so one day I just asked her, like, it's not the typical coaching conversation, but that doesn't mean you can't go there. And just, I asked her, like, Is there a time in your life that you remember feeling unsafe? Is there a time in your life where you remember being fearful that something might happen to your parents?
Mm,
And is there a time in your life when this kind of happened? And she noticed it started during COVID. Her father was a firefighter, so he was
mm,
a first responder. And during COVID, they were the ones, that were being exposed, like medical workers
yeah.
and firefighters were being. And so she kind of was able to like pinpoint that was the thing that started triggering her OCD behaviors.
Is it
And so
health OCD? I don't want to get too into it, but I don't want to get into what she specifically, because obviously there's subtypes. Was it like a health OCD thing? Like where she was,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So we don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you don't have to. We don't. Sorry, I just get really nerded out when I talk about OCD. So that's the.
Okay. Yeah. Then
Yeah.
because that's not my specialty. That's not what I typically
yeah,
do. Yeah.
yeah. I know. No, I understand. But sorry, it threw me off there for just a second. But I wanted to talk more about the collaboration aspect with therapists
Okay.
and how that works and how it's. Are most therapists open to it? Are they a little bit like, are they like, what's been your experience with that? Because obviously they're like, these people are, I know more than you, or is it like an ego thing? I'm just curious how that is.
Yeah, that's a really good, curious question. Yeah, I have definitely not experienced any really super over the top positive responses. They're all
Uh,
either, I don't know if it's ego or if they're just, they don't know who I am. They're not, because the thing is with the coaching industry is it is unregulated. And so I will give therapists that, like
Yeah,
we don't have a license to practice in a state. And so I understand that, which is why I did the national board certification to show that I do have a higher standard of a credential for myself.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
respect that a lot. That's,
Yeah. Because here's the thing, you can go on and get in 6 weeks, become a coach in a
yeah,
program, right? And that's scary. I mean, I don't want to say it's scary because I don't think that there are many cases that a coaching is really hurting somebody. You're not
no.
harming someone really. I mean, I can't find, I would be probably hard to find that. But at the same time, if you're going to hire a coach, you might as well hire a good coach and
Yeah.
to kind of do your research and figure out what their credentials are.
Yeah, the coaches I've met, yeah, it hasn't been like a 6 week thing. They've gone all in and done everything they can to be the best coach possible. And I'm like, that's what I like to hear. Because yeah, I don't. I'm sure there are people out there that have done the 6 week program and maybe they're successful at it. Maybe they just needed some extra tools. But
Mm-hmm.
and also it's probably just good to know like where that line is and where your lane is, especially if there's a therapist involved and not crossing over into that lane. So how do you know when you're like, when there's a situation where you're like, that's a little bit out of my realm, because you don't want to overstep your boundaries, of course.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that would, as a case by case basis. And if the
Yeah,
therapist was open to a conversation, that's where that's really welcome
absolutely. Yeah.
so that we can have that conversation and kind of figure it out. I did have one client who was doing EMDR therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a specific situation where the family didn't see a need for me to collaborate with that therapist.
Okay.
But luckily the girl, she was 18. She was old enough to kind of speak for herself
Yeah.
and kind of speak to her parents. So I think that was okay in that situation because I knew what I was working on with her about, and she was talking to me, and then I know that she knew right. So she was able to compartmentalize, I think, in herself, like what was happening where.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So she kind of knew, like, hey, I'm talking to you about this. I'm talking to the therapist about this. So she
Right.
was, yeah. Yeah, and I guess like at that age, and getting the teenage age, you're not dealing with a 5-year-old who wouldn't know.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's a little
Yeah.
bit different, yeah. So I want to kind of switch lanes a little bit, and ask about the podcast, because I've seen you've been doing the podcast for a couple years now, and it's called the Positively Healthy Mom Podcast. So. Well, what inspired the name? Obviously, the positivity part I can understand, but What I'm always curious how people land on the podcast names.
Yeah. You know what? That's a great question. Well, so I didn't originally name my coaching company Positively Healthy Coaching, and so that was the spinoff for the podcast was the Positively Healthy Mom. And so the funny thing is, it's kind of open for interpretation whether I'm referring to just simply myself as the Positively Healthy Mom, or if it's for moms who want to listen and kind of feel like they are a positively healthy mom.
Yeah,
It's open,
empowering.
but yeah, the idea is, I call it where my slogan or my tagline is where positive parenting meets well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So the topics are very diverse in that we do spend a good amount of time talking about some like physical health things, meaning all what I call the modifiable lifestyle factors: diet, sleep, exercise, stress management, screen management, friend management,
Mm-hmm.
anything that can affect our well-being. And then that kind of goes over to then the emotional and the mental and emotional well-being and how we're showing up as moms, because that directly 100% impacts how our teenagers are feeling.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Is it mostly you and another person, or is it mostly you, or how do you usually set up your episodes?
Yeah, I invite guests.
Okay.
I welcome guests to come. Yeah, it's always great to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's usually the best. It's hard to do on your. I've done some solo podcasts, and it's like you gotta like really get into the zone. Otherwise, you're just like, who am I talking to?
I know.
Like, I'm just, I'm talking to my cat,
Yeah.
and yeah, she doesn't care. But yeah. As far as the podcast goes, what's one of your favorite things about podcasting? Because mine is pretty simple, like the conversations, obviously, and getting to know so many different people. And you've been really consistent with your podcast, with your episodes, and that's tough to do too, especially when you're juggling being a mom and also your coaching as well. So,
Yeah.
and now, the speaking arrangements.
hmm
So you have a full plate. So how often do you release episodes?
We do once a week, but I
Okay.
do try to stack up a bunch of episodes so that we're not scrambling if it's a holiday or something like that. So
Been there. Yeah.
I've decided to just become really consistent at recording, and I like to have it mentally planned out. So my weeks consist of Mondays and Fridays. I either guest on a podcast or record a podcast. So that's what I do Mondays and Fridays, a couple episodes each day, those
Mm-hmm.
2 days. And then I do my coaching clients Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of that time is just kind of managing my business and then managing the rest of my life. So it's kind of all mixed together, but it's like kind of, I do have to have that separation as far as,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it gets a little stressful if I'm suddenly podcasting on a Wednesday morning because I'm like, nope, that doesn't match my traditional routine. I'm a creature of habit. I like to have, the Mondays and the Fridays just feel like organized in my brain.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. Organization is not something I'm the best at. So I respect that. I respect that. I'm a very scatterbrained person, but I'm also a very intrigued person. I like to learn, but I like to ask questions. So that's why I started podcasting. I
Yeah.
like to I'm just a very curious person.
Yeah.
Um so as far as some of the issues that you see coaching, is there anything that's really like lately, like you're like, man, I'm noticing this a lot, like a trend?
Yeah. I mean, it's really just kind of the big stuff that we're aware of, but I just become increasingly more passionate about how much parents play a role with how
Yeah.
their kids are feeling. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, like it's not that it's necessarily a new trend, but for
Yeah.
me it's just like a new passion, because client after client after client, what I see is parents just don't have the tools. They don't know how to show up for their teenager in the way that that teenager specifically needs.
Yeah.
And so it just ends up becoming it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that hard, right? Like, parenting a teenager, although there's all the jokes that, oh, teenagers are so difficult and
Yeah.
age group, right? It doesn't have to be that way. Like, if we have the tools and have the conversations, and yes, you can never predict, what could go wrong And of course, teenagers are always going to test their boundaries, which, by the way, I welcome. Like, if you have a teenager that's perfectly behaved and doing nothing wrong, I'm worried about that teenager. Like, they need to be doing something wrong, right? Because that's how they develop, and they're literally forming their own identity as who they are as people. And that usually is a sign, and you know, I can't generalize too much, but it's usually a sign that they're so terribly afraid to disappoint their parents. And if that's what it becomes, that they're like literally pleasing their parents and being this like perfect child, then that's where they're really abandoning themselves. And so it's like, if it was that type of kid, I'd be like, okay, go do something wrong. Like, right. Like, it doesn't have to be dangerous or whatever, but just do something.
Yeah, I get that, because that's very relatable. I actually noticed that a lot within my friend group. That was a big fear of, like, you know, letting your parents down, or, you know, not living up to your expectations and things of that nature. And that causes a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. Which, by the way, it's like we do as parents do want to have those expectations, and we do generally want the kids to like respect the expectations of the family.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they're doing it too perfectly, then that becomes a problem.
Yeah. It's like they're obsessed with that, and that's their you don't want that to be your whole personality, really.
Right.
But yeah, I was thinking about, so do you run into a lot of controlling parent situations where, like, the parents are kind of, you know, like, it's like almost like a puppet master type situation? I don't want that's, you know, exaggerating, but you know what I'm getting at. I had friends that their parents were just like, it was like, man, I'm glad that's not my parent, because they're trying to, like, basically live through their kids type of situation.
Yeah.
Is that something you see? Because I saw that a lot in just, I did some umpiring too, and I noticed, like, some of the parents, like, and like some of the kids didn't even, they were like really young, like 10 and under softball. Like, some of the kids, they didn't even want to be there.
Yeah.
You know? They were just doing it because their parents told them to.
Right. Right. Yeah, I see one of two. The two general patterns I see are the one you just described, the real controlling. And then there's the opposite end of the spectrum, which is more kind of falls into the category of, well, I don't want to get into all the parenting styles necessarily, but the more what they do is their child is having a problem. And so they say, here, can you fix my child? And so they're more the avoidant parent, or they're more like not involved. And it's kind of sad because the parent just doesn't necessarily want to deal with it. And it's like, no, we need you to help support.
You're part of this.
Yeah. So it can kind of go one of two ways for sure.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Or like some parents, like they tried everything they could, and they're like, this is like a Hail Mary, or, you know, this is our, you know, we don't know what else to do. You probably run into that situation as well, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because they, you know, the thing is, people typically parent, again, one of two ways. Either how they were raised, they tend to mimic it, whether they are consciously doing it or not. Or they go the extreme opposite, which is, I hated my childhood.
Yeah, I'm
going to be this really lenient parent. And then they're like too lenient, and there's no boundaries. And that's a recipe for disaster too. So yeah, sometimes it's like the Hail Mary is like, we need somebody to just guide us because we don't really know what we're doing. And the problem is we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we're doing wrong. So it's like, please help us. So yeah.
Yeah, that's gotta be stressful, but at least, like, it helps you know that, like, the parents care. They're probably parents that are a little bit easier to work with, because they're like, we're trying too. We want to see what's going on. And running across, I used to think like that a little bit when I was really young. But now I look back, I had a great childhood, great parents. But when I was really young, I was like, I'm going to be a different parent. I'm going to be the cool parent and all this stuff. And now I look at the cool parent situation. I'm like, that's not a good, you got it. My parents always used to say, not always, but they used to say, I'm not your friend. I'm your parent.
Yes.
And there's a big difference. That doesn't mean I don't love you, but it's just there is a huge difference between that. And yeah, once you're on that friend side, then they start getting away with all this, they start crossing the line and
Oh, yeah.
continuously crossing the line. And yeah, that wasn't a thing where I grew when within my household.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I can look back at it now as an adult and be like, oh, thank God that they didn't let me, have parties or, just like be the cool parents, because I had friends that had the cool parents, which some of them turned out all right, but I don't think it would have. It would not have gone well for me. I know that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so funny how our perspective does change over time. And yeah, I say the exact same thing to my kids. Like, I'm not your friend. I'm your mom, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's not my role. You have friends, right? That's not what I'm doing here.
Yeah, I didn't have you because I needed another friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a weird situation. It sounds like a movie you could create. But when you speak with parents, when you go on podcasts, do you generally have like a message you like to provide to, soon to be parents, current parents of, soon to be adults in their household? Is there something like I don't know, like a tagline or like a quote or something that you like to share with those people that are trying to parent in such an interesting world we live in right now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I have it narrowed down to one specific tagline, but what
That's
I
okay.
do generally find myself repeating over and over and over and over again is for parents to just listen more.
Yep.
Validate their child's feelings more. Don't try to fix their child's feelings. Just allow them the space to be able to feel those feelings. And if you're kind of doing those things, your child's going to feel really seen, loved, heard, supported, all the things that a teenager or a child needs to feel healthy and supported in their home and safe, right? And so it's kind of just our impulse every mom and every parent that I talk to, we all have the impulse. It's like this urge to step in, fix it, tell them what they're doing wrong, tell them what they could do better, give the advice, all these things. And it's literally just telling people over and over again, fight the urge, stop doing it, step back, take a step back. This is your kid's life. Let them live their life. Be their safe place to land and fall, or just to listen, and that's it, right? It doesn't even have to be any harder than that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. When did you first start doing the speaking at different schools? And what sparked that? Was there like a certain somebody heard you and they're like, who wants you to start speaking at our school? Or is this something you sought out? Or how does that even work?
That's such a good question. It's really honestly the way. Well, so I've been speaking for a while because in the life coaching school that I was in, they teach you coaching one-on-one, but they also teach you, they call it, it's like presentation skills. And the idea is that you're really coaching from the stage. So you have an audience, and just the general idea is that they're there for some type of a message. And so you're kind of there to influence them to take action on something, whatever that topic might be. And so that's how I originally got into just speaking in general. But then more and more, I just felt called to speak to students directly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so many kind of venues to do that. And I've spoken through a lot of nonprofit organizations that people have had me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've even spoken at there's an addiction center that has had me speak to. Well, actually, no, that's to the parents. I've spoken to the parents, not of the children who are having addiction trouble. So I'm kind of diverse, but really the passion with speaking to teenagers is because it's like a direct line to them. And I just want to inspire them, motivate them, give them just even the thought or the idea that their life could go a different direction that they hadn't thought of yet, and to just kind of give them the inspiration. Because I think back to when I was a teenager and we had a motivational speaker at my school, And I'm not saying they were good or bad, but I don't remember anything about what they taught me other than I was shocked that they were allowed to cuss in my school.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were trying to be like the cool speaker and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
drop some
yeah.
F-bombs and get the, it's just that everything I see, because of every client that I talk to, they're all kind of saying the same thing, which is they all have this like self-doubt, this fear, this anxiety, the stress, the pressure. And I thought, what a better way to kind of deal with that on a mass schedule, more global way than for me to just come into schools and deliver my content that I've created.
So you maybe think of something, because you said you spoke with parents of kids that were addicts. Is
Yes.
that correct? So I'm in recovery myself, so that sparked a question of
Mhm.
how those conversations go and what's your approach there, and because that's got to be a difficult process for those parents.
Absolutely. So yeah, so I don't go, my lane is not, I know of the science of addiction, but
Yeah.
what my focus is on helping build that parent child relationship, because typically if we're dealing with an addiction situation, there is a lot of brokenness in that relationship. So I
Hmm.
just help them, that kind of what I described to you earlier about the really listening, the validating, the hearing, to just show up and be there. Because if they can, if the teenager then becomes more trusting of their parent, because there's a lot of trust broken too in both directions.
Yeah.
And so if they can really learn those, the parent can learn those skills to be able to support their teenager, then that relationship's going to improve, hopefully.
Yeah, that's got to be really difficult. But yeah, speaking at an addiction center, so you spoke to obviously just the parents, but if you run across any clients that in the past that you've had that you're like, okay, this might be an issue here, or is there something common within teens that they're getting addicted to that you're noticing besides their phones?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, if it's an obvious addiction to something else like a substance, I don't treat, like that would be a
Yeah,
referral. That would be
yeah.
the perfect time to
You're like,
refer.
all right, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's out of my lane. But yeah, it's just if it's just a more of a behavioral addiction, kind of like a phone, which is not, again, like some type of clinical addiction, then
video
yeah, we
games,
can work on that behavior. Yeah, because here's the thing, like they're using that as a coping mechanism, right? And so if we can find better, healthier alternatives to deal with the stress,
mm,
then they're not having to resort to that. So yeah, that's something I can coach.
yeah, absolutely, because there is a gray area, and I think about this all the time, and I've talked to friends about it, where there's people that went through a period of time where they were addicted to a certain substance, and that certain substance, that was how they got through things. That was their everything, basically. And then they eventually, moved on, and then dropped it all together, and, changed their life, and, became, a more functioning member of society, for lack of a way to say it. And then there's people that, that constantly, are, they have to really pay attention to what's going on. Otherwise, they're going to end up right back where they started from,
Mm-hmm.
or where they ended up, actually. That's usually how it works, is that they pick up where they left off. And I know this because I've met several addicts that have relapsed, and because I go to recovery meetings and I see people, and I haven't seen people for a while, then they come back, and then, some of them never come back. But the common theme is like, Collin, they'll tell me straight up, they're like, Collin, it was 10 times worse. Like,
Mm.
going back out there. But there are those people out there that, like, they just had, that was all that they found something to use to get out of their head, or to feel less alone or isolated or whatever it was, and they just ran with it. Yeah, and like some people, that's their phone. Some people that's video games. Some people it's they you picked up they picked a different card,
Right.
and that's the card they chose,
Mm-hmm.
and and they got addicted to something that's already addictive. So it's like they're trapped at that point until they can
Yeah.
figure a way out of that. So, yeah, it made me think of that because not a lot of people talk about that.
Hmm.
People say, you're either an addict or you're not, and there's a gray area.
Absolutely.
And I think more people, I don't know, need to know about that. So I got on my soapbox there for a second. That'll happen every once in a while. So doing the podcast, doing the speaking, when you're doing the speaking, I wanted to know a little bit more about like how you choose your topics and how long you typically speak. Is it a presentation or I'm just kind of curious of the approach of that.
Yeah, and that it all comes back to one of a couple themes. So it's generally they know these are my specialties and I allow them to
Yeah.
choose depending on what the event is and who the audience is, how old are they,
Yeah.
What is their biggest problem. And so I do allow them to have feedback. And that being said, a lot of times they just, if it's very open and they say, we trust you on whatever your best judgment is,
Okay.
that happens quite a bit. And so I typically do some type of presentation related to stress, anxiety, and depression, because those are the three things that teenagers are dealing with most, or just like kind of general overwhelm. The thing that I've been leaning more and more and more into, because I've been spending more time on it and on the research, creating my speech that I'm the kind of the motivational speech. I named it, it's called the Decider. And so what that really is giving out, I'm laying out the framework of that think, feel, do, have. And a lot of teenagers just don't have even that simple kind of explanation about how those things fit together. But I'm very like story oriented, and I have slides that are like animated little stick figures, and I try to make it entertaining, so that way we're not sitting there listening to some boring, person who has to drop an F-bomb to keep us entertained, right?
Yeah.
Like I try to like really relate to them and connect them and let them know that I understand what they're experiencing, even though I haven't lived in this age of, digital, kind of mayhem. But that I can, at least from adults' perspective, do my best to understand about how they're feeling. And so the reason why I call it the Decider is to just let them know that they have more agency in their own lives than they think. They don't have to feel this way. They don't have to, like kind of what you were describing, even in that addiction conversation about they feel lonely, they feel this, they feel that. To empower them, to let them know that like you can change your thoughts, you can change your feelings, you can change your actions. And that's just like a spiral, and it can be an upward spiral or it can be a downward spiral. But the idea is that they, to the best of their ability, get to be the author. And that's why I called it the Decider, like the author of their own lives. Even if they are in a bad family situation or a bad other type of situation, like they can still, and it's not like the toxic positivity, like rah, rah, do your best or smile, even if you're unhappy, right? It's still acknowledging and validating the hard feelings, but then allowing them to decide like how do they want to move forward after this.
Yeah, putting something behind it, not just throwing a bunch of words at them.
Yeah,
that sound good. And I
that'd
get
be
what you're
annoying,
saying.
right? Like I don't want to have somebody give me some rah speech about my life. I'm like, well, you don't know me, you don't know how much I deal with on right? Like I don't like that. Like that's very off-putting to people.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where the sketch, the old Chris Farley sketch came from, where he was the motivational speaker. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I don't remember that. I love Chris Farley, but I don't remember that one.
It was on Saturday Night Live, and he was a motivational speaker, and he you got to watch it. Look it up.
Okay, I'll look it up.
It's hilarious.
Okay.
But he's like the opposite of what you want a motivational speaker to be.
Yeah.
That's the joke. So yeah, it's a good time. But and he's aggressive, or like he's Chris Farley. So he's yelling at people and stuff. And but one question I like to ask, I haven't asked this in a while, and you sparked it because I'm sorry to hear about you. You said it was your nephew that passed away. I've lost friends. I've lost a family member to suicide. And what would you have to say to someone listening that was maybe in that place or in that dark place and didn't really know what to do, didn't know how to move forward?
Yeah, because when you're in that place that is a place of total despair and hopelessness,
Yes.
and you don't see any options, and that seems to be your most viable option.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is anybody listening that is in that position right now, first of all, I just want you to know, even though I don't know you, but like somehow we know you're there and we kind of can feel that pain. Like I can feel that there is that pain in your life. And what I would want to say is it seems kind of impossible. And sometimes there are answers to impossible questions. Sometimes there are other exits that you don't see. Sometimes there are solutions to things, right? Like it's just like we don't know what we don't know. And so if we can just recognize that even though it doesn't seem like there is, to just somehow trust somebody who has worked with and I don't typically work with people who are that extreme. Like that is when I would refer.
But they probably been
yeah,
in,
yeah, and but even if I can just speak from like kind of a personal, like I'm not speaking right now as a coach, but just as a mom, if you could just potentially open up the idea that there could be another answer and that there is somebody who cares and that there is chance that your life can improve drastically if you just give it a chance. In fact, no, now that I think about it, I did have a person that I knew quite closely who I don't want to go as far as to say friend, but we were acquaintances.
Okay.
And he was in that space. And this is exactly what I said to him. Like, if you could just give it some more time, if you could just, right. And that's what I found myself. If you could just this, if you could just that. And even the positive person in me, if you could just see in yourself what I see in you, because I see somebody who is very capable. I see somebody who's very resilient. He didn't see that in himself. And so anybody who's listening, to just give it some time, give it a chance. It'll change. Like nothing ever stays the same. We know that. Like things are always changing. That's just the way life is. But then if like you're truly there, just reach out to somebody, find somebody, call the hotlines, call who you need to call, and just like get that support, because that's where the change will start to happen.
Yeah. I'm so glad that they changed the suicide hotline number to just a 988.
Yeah.
That was so huge. Like
right.
I remember advocating for that any way I could when it was in the process. And you can text it, which is great too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you said something that I always think about when I've been in a lot of dark spots in my life, and the biggest thing that I've noticed that's gotten me through that is, well, time, because with like depression or bad times, dark times don't last forever.
Right.
It seems like it's gonna last forever though, and I know the feeling. It feels like, well, I'm stuck like this. This is it. This is all I got. I don't have any other options. And I've been there, but like, it's almost like you have to use procrastination as a positive tool. And I had actually my last guest, he said, if today is a good day for suicide, tomorrow's a good day for suicide. So I'll wait and then just keep doing that every day. And then eventually, I'm not saying that's like the perfect thing to do, but I've never heard that. I never heard that before. And I was like, because I've heard of the procrastination method. I had a buddy of mine that he was going through that time, and he was old enough to buy a lottery ticket, so he bought a lottery ticket. So he had to wait for the numbers to be drawn. That was he's super smart, so he thought of an idea, and he's like, well, I have to live for at least this. Just so finding those little things to live for. Like I've had situations where I was waiting on a new episode of a show. That was like all I had. That was like
Yeah.
all I had. Like
Yeah.
I was just I was so depressed because I have depression. Especially during this time of year, it hits me kind of
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Mm-hmm.
Fall, I don't know, this seasonal depression. And where are you located at?
I'm in Austin, Texas, so very hot
Okay.
and sunny still. Yeah.
Yes, I need to make it down there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be down there at some point for comedy. I do stand up as well, so
Ah, cool.
it's crazy down there. I've heard. I have
Yeah.
a buddy down there. Um, but yeah. Okay, I'm gonna give you homework, and you have to watch that Chris Farley.
I've written it down. It's right here on my notebook. I'm definitely
You have to watch that clip and let
I
me know.
will.
Let me know about it. That's really enjoyable. But last thing I wanted to say is I know I was scrolling through your podcast and I saw your first episode was called "Give Yourself Grace,"
Mm-hmm.
and that's something I struggle with. That's something I think a lot of people struggle with. And I just saw that stand out because it's something my therapist has said to me probably a million times.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're so hard on yourself, and um, what would you tell somebody that is in that position? That's just like they're not giving themselves grace. They're just so hard on themselves, continuously beating themselves up. What's a good way to start to get out of that mindset?
Yeah. Well, kind of the typical, if we want to take a therapy approach to this, it's that self-compassion. And so
Yeah.
people, that's the thing. People have a really hard time being nice to themselves, but
Oh
yet
yeah.
they have no problem being nice to their friend, right? They
Exactly.
have no problem telling like, oh my gosh, you're going to be okay. It doesn't matter that you went back to your addiction. You're going to get through it this time. Like whatever supportive words you would say to a friend, if you could just give that to yourself, like that's why it's called give yourself grace, like giving yourself that gift, because we know that like shame is, it's really down there with that despair and hopelessness. Like it's the most, the lowest form of human emotion. And
Yes.
it's the most dangerous to us as humans. And so just to like, I always talk about kind of like the idea of like flexibility and releasing yourself from black or white thinking, because that's what happens. It's like so
Yeah.
extreme. Like I am bad instead of, oh, I did something that was a mistake. Like it was my action and I can repair that now, or I can try my best. And even if it's not a fixable mistake in some way, I'm human. All humans messed up, right? And so kind of putting the emphasis more on not who I am as a person. I'm not a bad person. I might have done something bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's great advice. Because, yeah, I needed to hear it too. Sometimes I get a little selfish and I'm like,
Yeah.
I have a coach on, so I need to get a little coaching. I'm
For
just kidding.
sure.
But
For sure.
also, I know a lot of people struggle with that. It's just like, yeah. And I've heard that. It's like, how would you treat this if it was your friend and not you? That approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, well, I probably wouldn't be that mean. I probably wouldn't, be so negative about it. So yeah, it's a good thing to talk about, and just another thing that needs to be talked about more.
Can I add something on?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah, absolutely.
one of the things that I think also might be helpful just for this topic is the idea of having just a purpose, a higher purpose, whether that's a big higher purpose or just a little higher purpose.
Yeah.
Somehow doing something that makes a difference or that matters, whether you can volunteer at an animal shelter or a homeless shelter or do something that gives back, because at the end of the day, we humans tend to always make it about us. And if we kind of take the focus off ourselves, but think of like, how can I serve others? Then we're not quite as hard on ourselves. We're really kind of getting that community where we're all in this together. We're all on this planet together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that kind of helps, because here's where that, shows up in my life, where sometimes I get hard on myself. As a mom, I'm real forgetful sometimes. I forgot to make the appointment for my kid, or I forgot to do this, or dinner was late, and now they have to stay up late because they have homework, right? And I do reflexively, and lots of moms do this, beat themselves up a bit.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where I just, use that phrase, give myself grace. And I'm like, you know what? I'm human. You know what? I've been so busy because I'm out here doing my mission, which is supporting teenagers and their families that, I don't want to ignore my own family, but I'm doing my best to kind of like balance those. And I do think that I'm serving also as a great role model for my kids so they can see what it looks like for a person to, I do. It's not like I'm a nonprofit. I'm not a nonprofit. I'm not doing this for free. Like this is my job.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I want to be a role model, especially for my daughters and for my boys too, that they can see that a woman is fully capable of owning a business, kind of like doing all the things that she wants to do, and that nothing's kind of going to get in my way. It's kind of my girl power kind of thing coming online there, and just showing them. And so that's where I do have to give myself grace because I am doing a lot, right? Like you kind of said that, like, oh, you're kind of balancing a lot. And I am. And I compliment myself. And so I do try to be kind to myself because here's where I'm going with this. I know that the more kind I am to myself, the more likely I am to be successful in serving out my mission in life.